Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and the Brew Bar. The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. 'Cause we learned it from you, Dad. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Final Destination edition. My name is Michael Shantz. I'm from the How Dare You Awards. With me, as always, the magical Tom Stewart. He's from Lonesome Whistle Productions. What do you got for us, Tom?
What if we're all getting that different strokes curse or something? You know, my go-to curses are Superman, the Kennedys, but apparently for this guy, it's different strokes. A sitcom starring a man who already has a developmental disorder.
Oh man, you gotta love that he says the different strokes curse.
I don't know. Maybe this was the go-to curse at the time. I doubt it.
I don't think so, but right, I doubt it. Well, of course, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the 2003 film Final Destination 2, directed by David R. Ellis, who also, Tom,
yes,
if you didn't know, directed Cellular.
Sorry.
Like that. Shark Night 3D and Snakes on a Plane.
He directed Snakes on a Plane. That makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
This guy is a comic genius.
Agreed. This movie, budget at $26 million, made $46.9 in the USA, cumulative worldwide, $90.4 million. So, again, these movies are hits, man.
Yeah, well,
people like these movies.
You don't see slapstick like this in any kind of movie that often. I am okay.
This is.
I am in.
Go ahead.
I'm just in complete admiration of the level of physical comedy that is going on here.
Well, and one of my first notes for all the movies, but I think is extremely prevalent in this movie. Like one of my notes says, everybody in these movies dies like Wile E. Coyote.
Yes. I think on purpose.
I agree completely.
I got to a point in them, I think one of my notes was like, is this kind of overkill of clumsiness? Is this, comic in nature, or, are they really just missing the mark here? Like, do they know how sublimely ridiculous every single accident in this movie is? And by the end of the movie, I was convinced that every death in this movie is the product of exquisite comic timing.
Yeah,
you can't accidentally engineer that kind of those kind of elaborate physical comedy routines with the setup and the punchline. You can't accidentally figure that out. That is deliberate.
It has to be, right? I mean,
I can't see.
I can't imagine that it's not.
At one point in this movie,
because if it is, it's like the world's best, most happy accident.
Yes, exactly. I sort of said, at one point I asked myself the question, how would this movie be different if it were pure comedy? Mm-hmm. And the answer was exactly nothing would have to change.
I was just going to say, it would stay exactly the same.
Even the fact that the actors are playing it straight,
right,
works to the comic. Because I think of, movies that this reminds me of, Airplane, the Naked Gun movies. The whole point of that is that everyone's deadpanning it on screen, and that's what makes it funny. And it's the same here. You wouldn't even need to change the performance style in this movie to make it more of a comedy than it already is.
Yeah, I agree completely. So we both listed Final Destination 2 as a good movie, and we both listed it as the third best in the series.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the downside of just that avalanche of slapstick from, from top to bottom in this movie is that it is one note compared to a couple of the other movies.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to admit that. that one note is like
sublime.
Yeah, it's like Jimi Hendrix playing a chord. It's
right.
It's beautiful. But yeah, if we're thinking in cinematic terms about what is the most holistically good movie, it's not this one.
Yeah, I agree. I find, obviously this episode is about Final Destination 2. That's what we're talking about. But I think it's important to note, because we didn't talk about it in the introduction, almost all of these movies are based on or around real stuff. Like they used an actual airplane crash for the first movie. There was a 125 car pileup on Interstate 75 in Georgia in 2002, and that's what they used kind of as the model for this movie.
Yeah. And that
because boy, does this movie have a car pileup.
But I'm assuming, that it wasn't like Inspector Clouseau in every car.
Right, yeah.
Because they effectively sell the notion that if there is not at least one accident on this road, the universe will break open.
Right.
Because there is simply no way. I mean, I've already referenced it, but the Naked Gun movies could not do a set piece of such violent absurdity with as much success as this.
Absolutely.
And not only do we get this spectacular car crash explosion, we then get two of the same in a matter of minutes.
Right.
This movie does not pull its punches.
Not at all. Well, and so let me ask you this, though, because there's a fundamental difference between this movie and really all the other movies. This movie lands a different punch because all the friends die.
Yes.
In the accident. So usually in each movie, there's a group of friends that are together and one person has a premonition. By the way, in case anybody doesn't know, these movies are all about accidents that occur. One person has a premonition, pulls a bunch of people off of whatever mode of transportation they're on or watching, saves the day. They think they're super lucky, and death has to come find them. In this one, the friends in the car, they all die, and this movie is different in that the story is then a bunch of strangers having to come together as opposed to the friends. What'd you think of that for this movie?
Oh, it's a brilliant gear change. I mean, I haven't seen the original, so I didn't clock it as an.
Well, that one's a little different too, because they're not all friends. They know each other, but some of them hate each other. So in that way, it's a little different too. But
well, I mean, the characters who were introduced. The first thing I thought when they got into the car, there's a kind of road trip. They're going on a road trip, right? These teenagers,
right?
When they all got in the car and
well, one of my first thoughts was these women are way too good looking for these boys.
Well, I mean that's every Hollywood movie
yeah.
ever. But my first thought was I cannot wait to see these people die.
Yeah.
And not only does the movie deliver that, it delivers it sooner than you expect it.
You're right. Yeah, it does happen quick.
Win-win for me. Yeah, and the eventual group of kind of stragglers from the car crash, who, spoiler alert, later all turn out to be people who are tenuously linked to the plane crash in some way, and thus should have died.
Right.
So death is kind of picking them off as a sort of afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
They're a much better rounded group of individuals, and better acted, better characterized.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that.
So yeah, I mean,
Plus,
that's a great. I didn't know that was a sequel inversion, so that's a great sequel inversion. But
yeah.
even without knowing that, I was on board for all of those choices.
How about, were you very happy to see Blonde Guy back? Did you pick up on that?
Blonde Guy?
Yes.
Okay.
From our previous movie.
Oh no, their faces all they're like one person when I look at them.
Blonde Guy from I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer. So he's recurring his role in a different franchise as Blonde Guy Asshole.
Oh, is he the lottery winner?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even. You know what? I think
the second I saw his face, I was like, Blonde Guy!
There's just this kind of collective douchebag character that I just have total face blindness for.
All right.
But but he's
I reveled in it.
Magnificent, that guy. He is. I mean,
he's so good.
He's a his character is great. His performance is great. He's also a great spokesman for Apple Mac.
Yeah, for sure, right.
I hope he got a few commercial gigs after that, because no one has carried an Apple Mac box that is so logo forward.
Yes.
In any movie
ever.
Not even Wayne's World.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Well, one of the things I delight in these movies is seeing how long before the exposition dump occurs.
it's
from the previous movies,
Yes.
Yeah, and in this movie you have two exposition dumps. The very first thing you're seeing after credits is this huge exposition dump with the newscast.
Yeah.
Which is going to recap everything that happened in the last movie for you, which I just think is hysterical.
And it goes even further, because you have a guy who believes in the supernatural version of events, and a news reporter who's trying to push the scientific. So they basically, you have two people who are debating the credibility of the original movie.
Yeah.
Siskel and Ebert style.
Yeah.
Like, we pan away from the TV, these two are still going at it.
It's so great.
And then we have a detail that you never hear again in this franchise, which is that it sort of implies that the public has largely accepted that the Grim Reaper exists.
Right, yeah, exactly.
We never hear about this again.
No.
I think James Wan comes in the third movie is like, we are not carrying
We're not getting that shit off. Yeah.
Because no one is going around going, must be the Grim Reaper for the rest of the franchise.
Well, and the funny thing is like in the first movie, you have the plane crash, and then the first kid to die, it's a really long, drawn-out scene where he's in the bathroom, and water starts leaking out of the bottom of the toilet, and it's creeping along the ground, and it's sinister, and it's moving towards him, while he's shaving or something. And of course he slips, and then, those cords that go across bathtubs,
yes,
like in a hotel room to dry clothes or whatever. That's pulled out, and I think he hangs himself on it accidentally. He slips and falls on that. But right after that, you have the water creep back up to the toilet and disappears, as and so you would really, they went to kind of painstaking steps to try and show death is a coming. And then it's just dropped for the whole rest of the movies. The whole rest of the movies, like we kind of talked about in the introduction, they're all Rube Goldberg deaths. They're all, just faulty equipment nonsense deaths.
Yeah,
but they're fun, man.
It's fun, and and what I like about playing it that way is that you can, a spoiler alert for one of the later movies, someone tries to come in and prove that this is just all happening empirically.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm just sort of like, if these people are that clumsy and that unsafe with everything they do, aren't the chances fairly high that their accidental deaths would happen anyway? It feels like death doesn't need to work that hard with a lot of them.
Just give them a week, Death. They'll do it on their own.
Yeah, blonde guy's apartment. I mean,
that apartment fire is just. I mean, it's.
If as soon as he gets into that apartment, I'm like, if it goes up in flames now, I'd buy it.
Right. Yeah.
Like just walking through the door, I would be like, I'm sure that would trigger some kind of electrical disaster.
It would have to. Well, and the amount of damage that water from cups, condensation from cups causes in this movie. All these movies.
Well, this is interesting because I guess having not knowing these movies, I assumed that death at some point would be personified. Whether it's like a guy in a hood with a scythe or something different. I thought we'd eventually get to see some manifestation of that. But, death acts through proxy, and we have these kind of recurring tools, I guess. Like death has a weapon, like Michael Myers has a knife.
Right.
And Freddy has his claws. He works mainly through water, electricity, birds.
Yes.
Just generally sort of long, sharp objects.
Yeah, you're right.
Long objects with sharpened edges. So I think it's kind of interesting that even though literally anything could happen to kill these people, after a while we get a lot of callbacks to the same kinds of deaths.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess again it's like how much variety do you want? I mean, you have to try and see death as this abstract thing, and yet you also kind of want him to be a Freddy, to be a Michael Myers, to be a Jason Voorhees.
Right.
So they play that really well. That you when you see some pigeons, you're like, oh fuck.
Well, basically, death exactly. Especially this movie is. Pigeons are a sign in this movie for sure.
I mean, and that whole dentist sequence, I think it's like, oh, it's great to exploit, our natural fear of dentistry.
Right.
And then a bird smacks into the window, and I'm like, and I guess our fear of birds.
Right. Yeah. and then a second bird hits the window, and what I love is the dentist says something like, "Ugh. These birds keep hitting that window."
Well, he says, "How do they expect me to work like this?" I'm like, "Oh, what?" Yeah. He said, "Oh, what level do you think this is controlled?" You want the government to commit genocide of pigeons just so you can drill people's mouths?
Just so you can earn your living? Well, and speaking to your earlier point, the only way that death manifests itself in the film to the characters in the films are by a chilled wind.
Yeah.
Chilled wind, a cool breeze comes across, and it makes every character in every movie go, that's strange.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think as well, with horror and horror kills, there's always kind of rules underpinning them.
Mm-hmm.
And sequels like to change up the rules, and we get some, and they each have a different kind of rule change that goes completely against what the last film did.
Yeah, totally. But I'm never mad at it.
No. This one is really pushing the idea that it's all about the order in which people are killed that matters.
Well, I mean, that plays in all the films, and that was a big thing in the first movie. In the first movie, he's looking at a map of where people sat, kind of a thing,
yeah.
and so it plays in all the movies. Look, we're just getting started here, everybody. We're talking about Final Destination 2. When we come back, we're gonna have some let's talk about the magical black man when we get back. How about that?
Oh, yeah. Farewell to the Flash.
We'll be back after this.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beer-stinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beers. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we are back. We're here talking about Final Destination 2, the 2003 David R. Ellis movie. So, Tom, I wanted to talk about Candyman, but in order to get to Candyman, we have that first just really delicious death scene of Blonde Guy from I'll Always Know What You Did last summer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the way that, I mean, I'm saying that this is this is one of the best sight gags in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't know that it would be like this would be trump carded again and again and again. But at the time I'm watching it, I'm like, I can't imagine it's gonna get funnier than this, and it did. And again, this is what I mean about comic timing. It ends with the ladder of a fire escape falling to within inches of the guy's face.
Right.
And then it takes a beat, and then the ladder goes straight through his eye.
Well, it takes enough of a beat that he thinks, "Oh, thank God that didn't hit me in the face, or I'd be dead right now."
I mean, that's comedy. It's great.
Yeah, and then it just I just love that it stopped like 2 inches from his face, but then gathers enough force to ram through his head.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, it's just pure comedy.
It's great.
So at any rate, he ends up at the coroner's office.
Uh-huh.
And one of my notes, I just think it's hysterical that the coroner clearly is working in a dungeon.
You could make or maybe I should save this for Pitch a sequel, but you could make a whole other movie about what goes on in the coroner's office. Because when we get to Final Destination 5, Tony Todd is wearing a suit like he's the president of America.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's some kind of... I get the sense that he's like a low-level employee, like just above janitor in this movie. When he gets to the final movie, I mean, maybe that's, like, just because he is like the ultimate legacy character now, and we need to start treating him with respect. Mm-hmm. But in this movie, I guess says he's just above, he's a guy who's just weird enough to put the dead bodies in the furnace and not complain about it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So I don't know what is going on in the coroner's office that by the end he seems to be running the place. Because he seems like a junior employee at this point.
And I just think it's hysterical that. Well, we also have to mention that Allie Larder comes back because she's the one that brings all these newfound horror heroes to go see him.
This is great sequel writing, because the news report at the beginning of the film more or less tells us don't expect anyone from the original cast to be in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And we start with a completely different cast of actors. And then as the movie goes on, we just kind of throw in a couple of legacy characters.
Yeah.
I think that is so well done from a screenplay point of view. It didn't mean anything to me because I didn't see the original movie, but when they turned up, I was like, that is genuinely surprising. I thought they were just going to look at photos of these people.
Right, yeah, for sure.
Because in sequels, that's what you do. You spend scene after scene looking at photos of actors who aren't in the movie.
Right. You have to look at the previous story, and it's always them finding news articles online or at the library.
So when she turned up, and when
how about her padded cell?
Well, I was confused. So I'm not a mental health expert.
Right.
But it seemed like she had access to a lot of things she could use to kill herself. She's in what I would call a padded cell.
It is a padded cell.
It is a padded cell, and yet she has access to media, a lot of cutting tools, and I just don't think that is...
Well, but that's also juxtaposed with somebody walking in the door and her saying, "You stay away." Like 6 feet. It's like coronavirus for these characters. Like, stay 6 feet away or I'll die.
I mean, if it's that luxurious, I check myself in.
Well, yeah, and exactly though.
You've got access to media. You've got a TV.
Because for everyone that doesn't know, she is in the padded cell by choice.
Right. It's like, what kind of bills is she running up on this place? Like,
so, that was my first thought. Round the clock care.
CCTV? But my thoughts immediately went to, this is just my go-to for when an actor from the original movie appears in a short amount of the sequel. I immediately thought, is this a Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes situation where she sort of said, "I'll come back, but, I'm not going to do much."
Mm-hmm.
And, I
There's kind of a big gap between Ali Larter and Charlton Heston, though.
Yeah, I suppose so. But well, not in Beneath the. This is a better sequel than Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Spoiler alert for when we do that series. So yeah, but I also thought that it made a lot of sense because that when she's visited by the new characters, they make them, take all the stuff out of their pocket, anything that might harm her.
Yeah.
I mean, she's obviously got scissors because she cut up all those newspapers, but whatever.
Maybe it was cut for her and brought into the room.
Well, yeah, maybe.
But also, how are they up on the wall? Are they stapled or are there tacks? Like, if there's tacks, you're still fucked, so...
Yeah. But I thought, if everyone just did this every time they entered a building, fewer people would die. Death wouldn't be able to get to you. But then, as soon as they mentioned,
I guess these movies seem to find a way, no matter what.
Well, as soon as they mentioned that that the order of death is a thing, I thought, well, why don't the people who aren't next stand around the person who is?
Yeah.
but I'm not writing these movies.
I would have loved to, spend 15 minutes of exposition about, 5 people sleeping on top of one person to protect them. Which is what would have to happen for you to get what you wanted.
I think this movie this movie is already great. I don't think even having every single character surrounded by 5 people at any one time, and or everyone taking everything out of their pockets every time they enter a scene, would affect this movie at all.
No.
I think it could only go up from here. But it's not. I mean, it's skipping ahead, but she's sort of in this movie to die.
Yeah.
And to make you think that she's going to survive. So it's like two surprises.
Well, and I'll say this, I think they do that well.
Brilliantly.
I think they really make you think that she's going to pull some of these people through with her.
Yes.
And then, of course she gets it,
They stop killing people for just long enough for you to think that she might survive, and then she's gone.
And part of it, because it's this whole scene with the elevator and all that, they kind of realize the order and realize what might happen next, and so they're trying to save somebody. And your assumption is that person's on the list, the person they're trying to save. So
yeah,
you think Ali Larter is safe, and she's not.
and that's also a bait and switch, because you focus on that opposed to what is kind of the setup for the final scare, which is depicted in the movie as an incidental detail that we all forget about, which is a kid, like one of the character's relatives gets saved from certain death.
Yeah.
But in a kind of way that's casual enough for you to totally forget about it.
Right.
So that puts him on the list, and he's the one who dies in the final scare. I mean, that's a great screenwriting move, but the final shot of the movie is also the funniest sight gag in the movie. So
yeah,
it's not just that the writing is clever, it's that the comedy is stupid. That's a lethal combination.
Yeah, for sure.
In a movie. I think that's why I love Superman 3 and Terminator Rise of the Machines.
And it's been a while since I've seen that Terminator. I'll give it another try. I remember hating it.
Yeah.
But
that was most people's reaction.
Yeah. That's for another day. I have a note here. I think it's when they're in the apartment and Ali Larter has now, we're kind of getting the third exposition dump.
Right.
So we have the news report. Then we have hey, I heard about this plane that, this all happened to people on a plane. And then you have Ali Larter come back to kind of explain order and all of that to them. So it's like a third exposition dump.
Well, a fourth if you count Tony Todd.
That's true. You're right.
I mean, he's doing more of the, the mystical side of it because he's African American, so,
He's the magical black man who's going, death has to have its way.
Well, it's funny because I'm like, even though this is even Tony Todd, Candyman himself, can't spin the fact that this is another lazy trope of the magical black man.
Right.
And that just shows that it is the most irredeemable trope in horror cinema. Because if Tony Todd can't make you forget it, then you're never going to forget it.
Right. For sure. If one person could do it, it's Tony Todd. And
another kind of interesting trope, and I really don't know how deliberate this is, but it really struck me. Justina Machado, who plays the pregnant woman in the movie. I have never seen her in anything where she is not either pregnant or a mother.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I every role I've seen her in, she's either been pregnant or has kids, and I noticed that as soon as I saw her. I was like, is she contractually obliged to be pregnant
at all times
in everything she's in? But then the fact that plays so much into the plot later on in the movie, it's like, this might be the key to defeating death.
Yeah.
I was just like, are they aware of this? That she's always cast as this character, and that's why why it's her. That's I don't know, but. It made me very happy. That is casting with intent.
Well, I want to speak to that, but I want to get this note where I love that when Ali Larter kind of explains order and all of that to them.
Yeah.
I love that one of the characters says, I don't know, seems like a reach. Meanwhile, they're like watching people die in the order they were supposed to die in, and I don't know, seems like a reach.
That's a better explanation than I can't remember his name, the biker dude, who's also a teacher. in
Right.
a violent school because he's African American, and grabs a
Right.
gun
Yeah.
very quickly because he's African American. In the frame of these movies, that's not my reasoning. That's these movies.
No, yeah, it's
reasoning.
the movie, right?
He says at one point, "My ass is alive. Has been all day."
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, how is that a reason for the fact that you're not gonna die?
Right.
And then, as I remember, his death is in an elevator with a
Right.
man who has a box of prosthetic arms.
Correct. But that's how Ali Larter gets it.
Right. But but I remember thinking.
And what happens with the arms? The arms,
they fall and
They-
hook. Yeah.
they're in between the doors, right?
Yeah, they get stuck in the door. And
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, the fact that this guy exists in the world is a scary enough thought before
Right.
whatever's about to happen.
Right.
What is he doing with this box full of prosthetic arms?
I actually have a note that says we should have a separate movie for the guy with the box of arms.
And there was moments in this film where I thought they're doing things that I've seen done in other movies, but this is the first time I've seen it. Like the drowning sequence towards the end of the movie. I mean, isn't that a shot for shot? Well, it's a predecessor of the end of Casino Royale, which is 3 years after this.
Yeah.
I was just like, Martin Campbell.
You could say that, yeah. Right.
Like, Martin Campbell must have taken his kids to the movie and be like, I haven't seen that in a Bond film. I'll get all the credit for this.
That's funny.
I'm the guy who invented bungee jumping in Bond films.
Right.
So I there were times when I was like, this movie looks derivative of a bunch of things that it actually did first. So, and I guess I didn't think about Snakes on a Plane, but that, I always think of Snakes on a Plane as a real watershed moment in that kind of self-parody.
Oh yeah.
Action horror movie. But maybe does this predate that? This predates that, right?
Yeah.
But this is, I think, even stronger in terms of intent.
Yeah.
To kind of comicalize itself.
Well,
with Snakes on a Plane, that was sort of a re-edit thing. It's like this movie's bad, but so let's play up what's bad about it to make it funny. This feels like this is doing that almost out of principle.
yeah, right. But this movie is taking itself. It seems to be taking itself more seriously, which is what.
You think?
Yeah, I think so. In style and the way it's shot. But what happens in it is so patently absurd. Like I said, everybody dies like Wile E. Coyote. It's all like Warner Brothers cartoons, these deaths. And
I don't think they're taking it seriously at all. I think that
no,
that
is,
I
mean it's. I don't mean that they made it seriously. I mean that they are presenting it seriously, but they themselves are like, hee.
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, the craft. That's the thing. Is like the craft of this is so evident.
Yeah, I agree completely.
That there's no kind of room for error or, and I guess that was the Snakes in the Plane thing as well. It's like, we need to re-edit this movie to make clear to everyone that we know how bad this movie is.
Right.
So I don't know if this went through a similar process, but it
Well,
seems like I can't think of a moment of this movie that doesn't feel like it's trying to comicalize everything that happens.
Well, I know someone who at the time was dealing with, like, Samuel L. Jackson was going to be in a movie that a friend of mine wrote, and this was around the time of Snakes on a Plane. They might not have even started filming it yet, but what I remember was Samuel L. Jackson was telling everybody the story about reading a script called Snakes on a Plane, and he said, I'll do it. And they said, and don't worry, we'll call it like Flight 747. Like we're going to change the title so it's not so stupid. And Samuel L. Jackson apparently said, hey, let me tell you something. If you change the title, I'm not doing the movie anymore.
Yeah.
So, it seems from the get-go they knew what they were doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I having seen this movie, I don't think David R. Ellis leaves anything to chance when it comes to the comedy of his movies.
Yeah, I agree. I guess my point earlier was just that it's one of the things that I love about this movie in particular, and all of these movies, is the tone of it. Like, the actors are taking it seriously. They feel like they're in genuine danger. They're all actually scared. They're, they're going through actual trauma. But when the trauma happens, it's all, it's always silly. So it's...
No, and that's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
A really important distinction.
I just think it's the hardest tightrope to walk, and they're walking it in these movies. And it works magnificently as far as I'm concerned.
A great example of what you're talking about is I've talked multiple times about the cokehead stoner character.
Yeah, his death.
Probably my favorite character in any of these movies.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're talking about happens with his death, because sort of moments earlier, he pleads to one of the characters that if he dies, they need to go into his apartment and hide his drugs and his porno in a way that is funny, but is actually very sweet,
but earnest and sweet, because
earnest,
it's a plea about his mother not seeing it, and
he has one of the most comically absurd deaths in the whole movie, where a wire fence cuts him into like 8 pieces.
Yeah, and
that balance of things is completely there. There's also the woman who's like the woman who's like got anxiety conditions, and she's on all kinds of different pills,
right?
And she gets killed with an airbag to the face.
Yeah, right.
Which is the most, but her problems are taken seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're gonna take another quick break, everybody, and when we come back, we'll finish up talking about Final Destination 2 right after this.
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
And we're back. We are here, Tom and I, talking about Final Destination 2. Tom, I got a question for you. Something that I found kind of absurd in this movie.
Just one thing?
Yeah, right. Well, it definitely happened in this movie, and it might have been referenced in other movies, but this idea that there's a character who says, you know what? I'm just going to kill myself. Death's a-coming. I better just kill myself. Every time a character did that, especially in this movie, I thought, whoa, let's take it easy there, Chief. Let's try to figure this out, because it's not suicide ideation. It's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not depression. It's not my life's terrible. It's like death's coming, so I may as well just do it myself.
Yeah, and that's another variation on the slasher genre that is entirely, that is totally particular to this franchise.
Yeah,
I've never seen this anywhere else.
Never see it in any other movies.
It becomes a really big deal, almost philosophically, in the next movie.
Right.
It's like, do you want to see your own death? Like,
Yeah.
So this is like the beginning of.
Well,
of like
let's save it for that movie.
Well, but this is like the beginning of, like, what can we, what kinds of questions does this raise?
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny for a slasher movie. I mean, I don't,
right.
I don't watch Halloween and think, wow, this really raises questions to me about Halloween masks.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, obviously, horror movies work all kinds of levels, so that is there. But it's not as I agree with you when someone's like, I'm gonna kill myself. There's really no way out of this now. I'm thinking, well, yeah. I mean, that is totally different from any other slasher movie where everyone thinks they can get away, even when they absolutely cannot.
Mm-hmm.
When there's absolutely no hope. But here, people are just like, I mean, yeah, no one runs towards, Freddy's claws or.
Yeah, right.
So it is really interesting.
I'm tired of not sleeping. I'm just gonna run right into it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just gonna go to sleep. So I do think it's definitely an interesting twist on the genre.
Yeah. Well, how'd you feel? We were talking about what's the best death scene in this movie?
Oh, the final scare where a barbecue explodes, taking a teenage boy with it, whose arm then lands in front.
Yeah, right.
Of someone else on the table, as if to suggest dinner. And that is the very last thing you see in the movie, and to me that is the funniest sight gag that there is in the movie, and probably probably the most unexpected death too, because you really I don't know, maybe I'm not as sophisticated a moviegoer as some people, but I had completely forgotten that this kid had dodged death earlier on in the movie just because so much was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, but this is what I mean about these that you can set your watch by these movies. As soon as we get out of the hospital scene, which appears to be the kind of like proper ending to the movie,
right?
The color palette goes really sunny, and I was like, "Here we go!"
Yeah,
Final
right.
scare, but I tell you, I was not expecting it to be the best
boy
moment in the entire movie for me. Did you have a particular favorite?
I as ridiculous as it was, I really liked Stoner's death.
Oh no, I mean that's amazing. Amazing.
It made me. It almost made me stand up. I went, whoa!
It's interesting to me that like this is the death that gets replayed the most in when they show footage from previous movies, later movies.
Yeah.
So you see that a few times, and I mean it's from whatever perspective you're looking at it from, it's beautifully done.
Yeah. So let me ask you about the kind of crux of this movie. Do you like, because all the movies play with this idea of you have to find a way to skip yourself, like somebody else has to die in your place and then you're skipped, that kind of thing.
I guess so, yeah.
But in this movie, it's we have to have a new life.
Well, but that's a red herring, isn't it? I mean, that's how I was reading it. That it does.
Well, that's my question to you:
Yeah.
is like, how does that play out for you? That whole bit of nonsense. Because I mean, we spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, to me, it's just good writing because, you solved. I guess it's not strictly a red herring because it does work. It's just that there's still collateral damage.
There's still collateral damage, right?
I have to say, I don't know if we've talked about this, but I adore the idea that, because I sort of the beginning of the movie, I was like, it's just the fear that people, because it's the 1-year anniversary of this plane crash, it's just that it's on everyone's minds. That's the only link between the first and the second movie.
Oh, okay.
And then as it went on, I was like, okay, so there seems to be, there seem to be the fact that they research it, and that's how they learn about premonitions. That's why that's how it's linked to the first movie. And then you realize, oh my god, all these people should have died. And death is just kind of like, crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
Well, one other thing...
I love that idea. More sequels should have this kind of thoughtful approach to how you're different from the original, but linked.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
The connective tissue is it's not nuanced, but it's interesting. It's totally different from what I was expecting.
But it's not tenuous either, right? Yeah.
It makes total sense, even though they throw in a character who claims to have been a cop who cleared up the plane crash, who we never saw in the original movie.
Right.
And we've come across this before.
Yeah, of course.
This character you assume is in the first movie, but of course he isn't. Even though they do that, I'm just wowed by that. And also the ability to, keep that, make you think that this movie is more tenuous than it is until they reveal that, is actually really well done. And then the new life thing is a nice idea. I like using Justina Machado as the kind of mother figure, because that's what she is in everything.
Right. She is great in the movie.
Yeah, she's
I love her.
She's terrific. But you know you're gonna get this final scare. But I was surprised about who it was, and that I didn't see it coming, because it was depicted in the movie as if it was a meaningless. It was like that.
Right.
You thought you thought that was the red herring.
Right.
But that's the real crux of the movie. Whereas Justina Machado is, in essence, the red herring. Although she does plug the death hole for a little bit.
The death hole, right? Right.
Just
for a moment.
Possibly a terrible metaphor to use. Given that she's giving birth, so we don't want to bring death holes into it.
Well, and there's one thing. It's funny because we're talking about the difference between movie to movie, and there's one thing that's really at play in this movie, and comes again in number 4, I believe, right. Or the multiple visions,
right?
And that's really at play in this movie more than any of the other sequels. It's not just one vision at the beginning of the movie. It's repeated.
When we get into Final Destination 3, there's clearly an attempt to. That becomes so unmanageable that they have to find a different device.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about that when we talk about the movie. But yeah, that's an area of the movie where I thought, this is unsustainable. We can't just have a vision for every death, for every scene. But I guess this is it's sequels are about upping the ante, so it does its job there too. But it does it in a way that no one can kind of like run with what it does. Like it's not. It's basically it's like handing a turd sandwich to the next guy. It's like, make this work, dick. It's like.
Good luck, asshole.
See ya, James. Enjoy your franchise. It's like I could just see like James Wong looking, watching this movie and being like, "Look how they massacred my boy." It's like, this is a comedy now. When did this become a comedy? But I'm happy.
There's something at play in the original movie that comes back in the fifth movie that's not too present in any of the other movies, and that's cops.
Yeah, well, there is a moment where I'm like, okay, we're in a Law and Order episode now for a little while. Fine. Yeah. That's,
although, you have one, just because the. What is he? Is he a highway patrolman?
Yeah, he's a highway patrolman. He cleaned up.
So that's one of your main characters in this movie, but that's the only reason cops are kind of present in this movie at all.
Mm-hmm.
In the other movies, in 1 and 5, there's a procedural element of, explain to me what happened, and them thinking that the kids must be involved, and it turns out to be an accident, and blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
And I think it's funny that it's like present in some movies and comes back, and you have a cop in this movie as a character, but in all the other movies it's more, you got to answer some questions, then you don't see the questions answered at all. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, you can go now. Is pretty much all you hear. Like, okay, we've got your statement. You can go.
Which is strange because you might as well. I mean, I like how the cop works in 5 in a lot of ways, but
yeah, me too.
I also like the fact that here there isn't much of that. I don't believe, the skeptic stuff is kind of written off at the beginning when that guy in the news report says, and by the way, everyone's just accepted that the Grim Reaper is a thing. And so, I mean, he is the police officer who cleared up Flight 180.
Yeah.
So he must know that this is a distinct possibility. That's what's great about this plot device is that they're people who they know about Flight 180, so they're sort of already mentally on board with this. So it doesn't actually take that much convincing for them to go, "Oh yeah, we're all being picked off by death one by one. We've heard of this happen, and the public at large has accepted death."
Well, yeah, and that's one of the interesting things about these movies taken as a whole is how long it will take the characters to believe.
Yeah, that is a huge variable in these movies.
Yeah,
and each of them does it differently.
And I find that interesting in and of itself, that each movie makes its own choice about that.
Here, there's a little bit of resistance, mostly coming from, if there's a skeptic character, it is that the teacher biker.
Well, and just with the one line, seems like a reach. It's like...
But there's a little bit of resistance, but everyone gets on board very quickly. I mean, we'll talk about the final destination, but I mean, I know he's Bubba Gump. I know he's Bubba from Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
But he just buys into what has happened unquestioningly.
Oh, he is on the case.
It's like, that is too much. Maybe Courtney B. Vance is like a little slow on the uptake. Here, it's a nice mix of both of them. And having an African American as skeptic, despite the fact that in other ways he's horribly stereotypical, is actually good because it counterbalances the magical black man element.
Yeah,
you get one. There's one black guy who's being very empirical about things, and there's Tony Todd in a dungeon going, "That's gonna get you."
Yeah, right.
So
problematic in different ways.
But an absolute joy of a movie. I cannot tell you how happy this movie made me. And the sequels didn't disappoint on the whole.
No,
which
I agree.
I have never been in this situation before with a franchise. I don't think.
These movies are so strange. They're so strange. I can't believe that somebody agreed to make them. I can't believe that they have sequels. I can't believe that audiences were into them.
Well,
but all of those things are true, and they're ridiculous.
It is ridiculous,
but they're fun.
It reminds me of, like, when old Hollywood worked best is when it was kind of like pushing a formula that worked.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like it's not like we look at movies from like the 30s to the 50s in Hollywood and go, wow, these are all these are all totally different. They're working to something that is like literally set down in guidelines. It's like, this is how you edit a scene. This is how the characters go through the story. And I feel like it's the same here, where it's like, keep the formula because that works.
That's what works, right?
That's what works. And you just, you do artistic things and mess about with that side of it.
Yeah.
You mess around with the style of them, the content. I mean, these movies could be programmed by computer. They're so rigid in how the story develops every single time. And
it's so funny that they speak to each other in that way, but are all completely interdependent of one another as well.
Yeah.
Cast starts over, except for this movie. You're always starting from zero.
Yeah, and another thing I like, this is a franchise-wide thing, is to have connections that are not about story, that are about, there are certain products or brands that, like, icons, symbols that we see that remind us of the previous movies, but they don't have anything to do with story. Like, they don't.
Right. Yeah.
And that works on so many levels. It's a dream. Whenever you see that can of pale ale turn up, it's like oranges in The Godfather. Someone's in trouble. But also at the same time, it's like, I guess we call them Easter eggs now. I mean, they're kind of they're motifs. But they do. That's kind of enough. Although this movie brilliantly straddles that line between, being a total reset and also a legitimate way of continuing the story.
The story, right? Well, you and I are on the same page, Tom. Ladies and gentlemen, you tell us: do you love Final Destination 2? Send us an email.
There's got to be someone who
hates it,
who has reservations.
Yeah, I'm sure there must be. So send that to us at theeverythingsequel@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, find us on Instagram.
Rate and review us.
Rate and review us, please.
On iTunes,
we need it.
Or whatever it's called now.
I keep saying listeners, so I probably should say listener.
Well, you don't sit around the laptop with your family to listen to podcasts like I do.
No, me, myself, and I, my friend.
Sit this fireplace, listen to the dulcet tones of Everything Sequel.
All right, so stay tuned. We got Final Destination 3 coming up next. Have a great day. Bye-bye, everybody.